Chris Gabehart spent 13 years building Joe Gibbs Racing from the inside. He started as an engineer, worked his way up to crew chief, and eventually became competition director, the man responsible for how one of NASCAR's most powerful teams raced every single weekend. Then the day after he agreed to leave, he pulled out his personal phone and started taking pictures. Not of memories, not of his office, of the most sensitive files on his JGR work computer. And right now, Joe Gibbs Racing is going after him and his new team in federal court. Here is how it started. November 6th, 2025. Joe Gibbs and Chris Gabehart sat down and agreed to part ways. Both sides described that meeting very differently. JGR says Gabehart wanted a bigger role inside the organization. When that did not happen, he accepted a contract exit. Gabehart has a different version. He says his authority was being undermined by the way JGR handled the number 54 car, driven by Ty Gibbs, the grandson of Coach Joe Gibbs himself. Gabehart says that car was not held to the same standards as every other JGR entry. He was asked over and over to crew chief it and eventually agreed to step in for 9 races midway through the 2025 season. He was not happy about it. So the split happened. A separation agreement was being worked out. Then JGR ran a forensic review on Gabehart's work laptop. What they found stopped everything cold. November 7th, 2025, one day after the meeting with Joe Gibbs. Gabehart used his personal cell phone to photograph at least 20 items displayed on his JGR computer. The images included full-season post-race performance breakdowns, complete team payroll records, driver compensation figures for the 2025 and 2026 seasons, sponsor revenue numbers, and pit crew analytics. He also connected his personal Google Drive account to his JGR computer. He created a folder. He named it Spire. Inside that folder was a subfolder called Past Setups. He accessed that folder multiple times, even after he turned in his JGR laptop. Court records lay out exactly what Gabehart took. A 141-page PDF from a 2025 Las Vegas race containing every data point JGR tracks at a race weekend. More than 20 setup and simulation files built by proprietary software using inputs from hundreds of JGR employees collected over years. A document covering engine outputs and recommended gearshift points. A document detailing how JGR manages tires through a race. A document showing how JGR calculates fuel mileage for its drivers and its competitors. And a document outlining JGR's entire process for grading performance during races, information that could immediately help a rival team close the gap. Now here is where things get much worse. November 15th, 2025. Gabehart deleted a series of text messages he had exchanged with Spire co-owner Jeff Dickerson. Dickerson deleted the same messages on his end using an auto-delete function on his phone. JGR found out. Their lawyers are now pushing the court for what is called an adverse inference, meaning they want the judge to assume the deleted messages would have hurt Gabehart, because he chose to delete them. The texts that survive do not help his case either. Messages from November 18th show both Gabehart and Dickerson already talking about lawsuits and settlement discussions. When JGR moved toward filing for emergency legal relief in February 2026, surviving messages show Dickerson texted Gabehart that everyone was excited to see his legal response. He also told Gabehart that Spire was in the boat with him. JGR went further. They claim the NDA Gabehart signed with Spire on February 16th, 2026 was not a real safeguard. They argue it was a document thrown together once it was clear a lawsuit was coming, designed to look like compliance while protecting nothing. There is also what JGR calls the focus plan. Within 15 days of leaving JGR, Gabehart created a strategic document for Spire. That document is currently sealed by the court, but JGR's filings describe it as a roadmap built around JGR's confidential methods, including setup procedures, crew chief audits, driver debriefs, and performance analytics. Then in January 2026, JGR says Gabehart created a spreadsheet inside Spire that closely mirrors JGR's own race performance tracking tool. JGR filed the lawsuit on February 19, 2026. 5 days later, they added Spire Motorsports as a co-defendant, accusing them of tortious interference. The damages they are seeking, more than $8 million. Gabehart admits he took files, but he says he never shared them with Spire. He also argues JGR broke its own contract first by cutting off his pay after the split. His legal team has pushed back hard, calling JGR's strategy file a motion, make an accusation, ask questions later. They point out JGR has not produced a single verified instance of Gabehart actually sharing protected data with Spire. That is the narrow line this case is sitting on. Taking files is one thing. Proving those files reached Spire, shaped decisions, or gave them a racing advantage is a much harder fight. JGR does not just need suspicion. They need a paper trail, a message, a file transfer, a matching spreadsheet, or some proof that connects Gabehart's old access to Spire's new performance. Without that link, the case becomes more about fear than confirmed damage. Spire has denied everything. Their position is that they have an alliance with Hendrick Motorsports and Chevrolet. They do not need JGR's data, and they do not want it. The judge agreed with that, at least early on. The court found no evidence that Spire actually has any of JGR's confidential information in its possession. The temporary restraining order against Spire was denied. The order against Gabehart was a different story. Judge Susan C. Rodriguez ruled that Gabehart must immediately stop using, transferring, or retaining any JGR confidential information. He must return what he has. He can continue working at Spire, but he cannot perform any duties that match what he did as competition director at JGR. That ruling gave both sides something to work with. Gabehart was not forced out of Spire completely, which mattered for his defense, but JGR still got the court to recognize the risk around his old role, his old access, and the files he admitted taking. In plain terms, the judge did not shut down his career, but she drew a hard line around anything that looked too close to his JGR job. The court also confirmed that Gabehart's non-compete agreement is valid and enforceable. The 18-month restriction, the same length of time left on Gabehart's original JGR contract, was ruled reasonable given his senior role and JGR's right to protect what it built. Then Spire started winning, and that changed things. In 2025, none of Spire's 3 drivers finished inside the top 20 in the championship standings. In 2026, after bringing Gabehart in as chief motorsports officer, the team looks completely different. Carson Hocevar earned his first career Cup Series win at Talladega on April 26th. He is currently 6th in the standings. Daniel Suarez, new to the team this season, is sitting 14th. That kind of jump is exactly why this lawsuit became so explosive. In NASCAR, teams do not usually transform overnight without people asking why. Better cars, better calls, better prep, better notes, better race execution, all of it matters. And when the person tied to that improvement just left one of the most organized teams in the garage, the questions get louder.